So our next guest is Dr. Jeff Thompson. And hey, Dr. Jeff.
Hi, how are you, Carmen and Jeannie?
Well,
Doing well.
doing well. So, Jeannie, do you want to finish the introduction?
Sure. Our next, well, I started to say contestant, but I'm like, this is not a game show. Our next
The Poe
reader
is
on our
right.
wonderful Poetry Live is Dr. Jeff Thompson, and he's going to give us, for his first rendition, the Annabel Lee poem, which is one of my favorites. I know it's Carmen's favorites too, and I think is Dr. Jeff's favorite also. And Dr. Jeff himself is a publisher. He is let's see, okay, don't tell me. Dark Shadows. That's right. I was
Mhm.
like, I couldn't for the life of me remember that name for something. But he himself is an author and a fan of Dark Shadows. So, Dr. Jeff, would you like to continue telling us a little bit about your work and who you are?
Hi, I've written three books about producer-director Dan Curtis, who created Dark Shadows, and produced The Night Stalker and directed Trilogy of Terror, Burnt Offerings, The Winds of War. I taught English at Tennessee State University for 35 years and recently went back to both TSU and Nashville State Community College to teach a few classes. Now, do
Nice.
you want me to start with Annabel Lee or The Telltale Heart?
Whichever one you want,
Yeah.
that's up to you since you're going to be coming back later to give us the
Okay.
Telltale Heart and I forgot the other one.
Okay. Well, in my next segment, I'll have more time, so I think I'll save the poem and another story for that
Perfect.
Okay.
time.
Okay.
But right now, I would like to share with you one of the scariest stories ever written, The
Nice.
Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe.
All right.
True. Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well into the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night just at 12 I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the eighth night I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie back down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death-watch beetles in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no, it was the low stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night just at midnight when all the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He must have been saying to himself, "Oh, it is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death in approaching him had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could to maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish beating of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder, every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder! I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and the officers had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasure, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But before long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, louder, louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark, louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here, it is the beating of his hideous heart.
Excellent.
That was
Yeah.
awesome, Dr. Jeff. Love that.
Thank you very
There's
much.
that heart right there.
Yes.
Keep on fire.
Yeah, at the time, Poe wrote that it was the scariest, most horrifying story ever written. The reading public had not heard of anything like that, and still today it is one of the very scariest stories of all.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, thank you so much for that reading. That was
Mhm.
amazing.
Oh,
And
thank you.
just to let our viewers and our viewers actually today know, Dr. Jeff Thompson is one of our judges for the poetry contest as well. So,
Right.
Yes.
yes, and
Yes.
he is going to return in just a little bit to do
Mhm.
Annabel Lee and the Cask of Amontillado. So, thank you so much, Dr. Jeff.
See
Thank
you soon.
you.
Yes, we'll see you in a little bit. Oh, yes. So Dr. Jeff Thompson is back. There he
Back again.
is.
For you.
Well,
Back again. Check it.
yes.
It's the regular. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
welcome
showing
back.
my age.
And he has a little bit longer time slot this time because
Hmm.
he's going to be reading two more Poe works. And
Hmm.
again, like Jeannie said earlier, one of both of our favorites, Annabel Lee
Hmm.
and the Cask of Amontillado. That's that short story is in one of my top five favorites of Poe's.
Mine too. Mine too.
So,
Great.
and so, Dr. Jeff, whichever one you would like to do first, we're letting you just run the show. So,
It's your next 20 minutes. So take away and have
yes,
fun.
Okay. We probably will have a little bit of time to talk afterwards, too.
yes, yes, absolutely. That sounds great. All right, so take it away.
Now I would like to share with you one of Poe's greatest poems and one of his most unnerving short stories. Let's begin with the poem, which, as I say to my students at Tennessee State University and Nashville State Community College, I call this poem horribly romantic. Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Gotta give snaps. Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. And when was that poem posted? Was it early or I can't remember when he published or when it was written.
It was one of the last things he wrote.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's why I was like, it was like this poem always holds to me like it's kind of an ending,
Hmm.
not only for his love, but kind of for him, just as a goodbye. So it was, it's always one of the most powerful ones for me.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
Everybody says great job with Annabel Lee, bravo. And Jason says it was published after his death, which that's just sad. It was written before, but it was published after, so that's just worse. All
Wow.
right, so I'm going to shut up now, and Dr. Jeff, go for it.
Okay, well, now let's hear another scary story. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as was my habit, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his imminent destruction. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmary, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley like a jester. He had on a tight-fitting, party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How? Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival!" "I have my doubts, and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado! I have my doubts. Amontillado! And I must satisfy them. Amontillado! As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Well, come, let us go. Whither? Where? To your vault. "Oh, my friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese, I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire cloak closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeau torches, and giving one to Fortunato, led him through several suites of rooms to the archway that went into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," he said. "It is farther on, but observe the white web work which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled the look of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked at length. "Nitre? How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough! The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True. True, Fortunato, and indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the deck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting him with the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. "I drink to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults are extensive." "The Montresors were a great and numerous family." "I forget your coat of arms." "A huge human foot in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lacessit." Nobody wrongs me with impunity. "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre! See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed now. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back before it is too late. Your cough—" "It is nothing. Let us go on. But first another draught of the Medoc." I broke and released him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" "Not I." "Then you are not of the Brotherhood."
How?
"You are not of the Masons."
Yes, yes, I said, yes, yes.
"You? Impossible. A Mason?"
A Mason.
"A sign. Give me a sign."
"It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire.
"You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado."
"Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the fourth, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess.
in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial reason or use within itself, but formed merely the interval between two of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand, Fortunato, over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No? Well, then, I will positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" exclaimed my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I stood uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated, I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and he grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last, the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position. But now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will not they be awaiting us at the palazzo, the Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, Let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor! Yes, I said, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain to a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, Fortunato! No answer. I called again, Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. Rest in peace.
Yes.
That was amazing. Loved it.
Thank you.
Take that.
Yes.
It's like, oh, and the switching from the characters was phenomenal. It just made it
Yes.
very immersive, and that just made it more for me because Dr. Jeff knows, and I think everybody that's listening, probably that's watched our poem plugs, knows I'm not a big fan of listening to stories. But these types of stories, they remind me of the campfire, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Sitting around the campfire and somebody telling you, and you're like, yeah, who's gonna get it? Get it, get it. Holly goes the smile at the end.
Yes.
Bravo, Jeff, Cheryl, and Gregory Word Maven. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Gregory. I'll just call you Gregory. Wonderful. Wayne says castastic.
Ah,
Ah,
I
love
like
that.
that. Me too. And they love their laugh and love how you use the trowel as the prop. So that's just perfect.
Yes. Yes.
Wonder how many people actually would know what that is, especially the younger generation.
That's true.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, not a lot
That's
of people
awesome.
would probably recognize that unless they work in construction. I'm just saying.
Yes.
So
or if
once
they have
more,
seen or if they have seen an Edgar Allan Poe movie or Dark
mhm.
Shadows,
That's
because
true.
a couple of characters were walled up several times.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
mhm. It's
Yeah.
always the wall.
Every time that would happen as I was watching it, for the love of God,
The
I
love
would yell
of
out
God.
while I was watching. Oh,
Yeah.
well, Dr. Jeff, what are you
Mhm.
working on right now?
There is a very long, beautifully illustrated interview with me in Wonder Magazine number 18. It's available from Amazon. It has pictures of many of Dan Curtis's productions. The interview is all about Dan Curtis's horror productions. And there are even some TV guide ads for Trilogy of Terror and The Night Stalker and some of the others, and some pictures of my collections here at my house, and one or two of me, and two of Sadie, a Pomeranian dog who is the sweetest little girl in the world. I have shown you Sadie at some of our Zoom meetings.
Hmm.
Yes.
So Wonder number 18 is out right now, and the interview is nominated for a Rondo Award. You've heard
Wow.
of the Rondo
Congratulations.
Hatton Awards for science fiction, fantasy, and horror
Okay.
in
Hmm.
books, magazines, movies, TV, podcasts, everything, rondoaward.com. So the interviewer, Mickey Gunter, is nominated for interviewing me. And in a month or so, Wonder number 19 will come out. And there's a shorter interview with me, all about Dan Curtis's 1973 TV movie, The Norliss Tapes.
Nice.
And I'd like to show you the books that I have written about Dan Curtis. I've written three: The Television Horrors of Dan Curtis, um, all about the horror productions, about which I first wrote my doctoral dissertation and then reshaped it into a McFarland book.
Okay.
And then House of Dan Curtis,
Mhm.
all about the mysteries and crime dramas from the production house of Dan Curtis.
Mhm.
And finally, Knights of Dan Curtis, all about Curtis's epic productions, his great adaptation of Dracula with Richard Matheson,
Mhm.
and his two World War II miniseries, his Western, and his UFO miniseries, Intruders, They Are Among Us.
Okay.
All of the books are available from Amazon. The first one is available also from McFarlandBooks.com.
Okay.
Um, I've done a lot of work on the productions of Dan Curtis. I've written about them, watched them, studied them, rewatched them ever since I was a teenager. And all three of my books cover all 4 dozen of Curtis's productions. So if you pick up any one of the books, you'll know about all of them. The love stories, the family dramas, the Western, the mysteries, everything, as well as the horror. But as I said, one book focuses a little bit more on horror and another on the mysteries and crime dramas like Come Die With Me. And then the last on the epic um,
Okay.
productions that he did. You know, during and just after the run of Dark Shadows, 1966 to 1971, Dan Curtis directed 2 movies with the TV cast, House of Dark Shadows and Night of Dark Shadows. So
Mhm.
that's how I got the idea to name the second book House of Dan Curtis.
Yeah.
So a fan friend of mine said, well, if you've written House of Dan Curtis, you're going to have to write Night of Dan Curtis.
Yes.
So I wrote Nights, plural, of Dan Curtis,
Mhm.
all about the nights that we spent sitting in front of the TV watching The Winds of War and War and Remembrance.
Yes.
Nice.
Very cool.
That's been good. Yes. And Cheryl says, Jeff, I used to run home from school to watch Dark Shadows. Showing my age, I'm going to look for your books. And she also asked, did you have any part of the Tim Burton remake of Dark Shadows with Johnny Depp as Barnabas?
I write about it. I give it a review in this new second edition of my book. All 3 books are now in a revised second edition. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Fans have very mixed and often heated opinions about the movie. It's a good vampire movie and it's a good Tim Burton movie, but it's not necessarily a good Dark Shadows movie because we fans of the show took the show completely seriously. There sometimes was some humor or maybe some unintentional humor, but the actors were playing it straight. They were not sending up or spoofing the material. They were deadly serious, and that's how they were so convincing and drew us into the story. So with the 2012 Tim Burton, Johnny Depp, Dark Shadows, the dramatic parts, the romantic parts, the scary parts are very good, but the rest of it is far too silly to be a serious Dark Shadows movie. But judge for yourself. There are a lot of good aspects of it. The art direction is fantastic. Colin Wood and the town of Collinsport, and Christopher Lee has a part in the movie, so he now is a part of the Dark Shadows universe. But if you want the real thing, watch the daytime Dark Shadows serial. All of it is on DVD, and I think there are some Tubi and Pluto channels that show it. Or watch the outstanding 1991 nighttime revival of the show, starring Ben Cross and horror star Barbara Steele. Sadly, it ran for just 12 episodes, 13 hours. It should have run a lot longer. It was a very good nighttime serial, a great treatment of the show, brought up to date for the 90s and for nighttime, sort of like a dynasty with fangs. So look for that on DVD, or maybe it's streaming somewhere, and take a look at that, and then you will be well versed in Dark Shadows, not to mention the paperback novels, the comic books, the Viewmaster reels, the newspaper comic strips, the games, the puzzles, the masks, the trading cards. Dark Shadows was its own cottage industry back then, and one of the highest rated shows on daytime television. At the peak of its popularity, it commanded 20 million viewers every day. And now today, to get an audience like that, you'd have to have an NCIS episode or a Super Bowl or Academy Awards, but 20 million fans were watching in 1969 during the popular 1897 storyline. And even when the show ended in early 71, it commanded 12 million viewers, which would be fantastic even today.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine with all the streaming access how well Dark Shadows would have more of a following even in today's society? Because it's very cultish in its own industry. Because to me, it kind of reminds me of the Star Trek world and its cult following and all that. Because, Dark Shadows was to me more along the lines of like the Munsters, the Addams family, but it had its own unique take. So that's why it was just, it was exciting for me because it was just so not on the same, I guess. It was abnormal to all the other normal that was going on. So, but thank you, Jeff, for,
Yes, thank you.
sharing your wonderful readings with us. And we look forward to it. And we look forward to our Poe and Plug discussions. And we look forward to more of your interviews. And good luck on the
Rondo.
Rhonda awards. Yes, Rhonda. Wanted
Yes.
to make sure I got it correctly. And even Jason said Trekkie approved. I'm like, okay, there we go.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So,
Well, and I
but
also want to remind everybody, Dr. Jeff is a judge for us for the poetry
mhm.
contest.
Right.
And we look forward to that getting started here in just a few days.
Well, thank you
Yep.
so much, Jeannie and Carmen. This has
Yes.
been a great day so far, and I can't wait to see what everyone else has to say and read and share with us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And also, too, Dr. Jeff is going to be part of us for our Doomsday event in May,
Hmm.
on May 17th, and that will
Yep.
be live streamed as well. So thank you, Dr. Jeff,
Yes.
for being such a great supporter of us. And we love having you in our
Mhm.
Poe community.
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank
Thanks. Talk
you.
to you soon.
Yes,
Bye.
talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.